So hello, folks. I'm Nick Bernardo, your host of MyGovWatch Live, the B2G Roundtable. If you're east of the Rocky Mountains here in the US, good afternoon. Good morning to those out west. And hello to anyone joining us from other far-flung corners of the earth or watching online in the distant future. Today is Wednesday, October 19th, 2022. This series is brought to you by MyGovWatch.com. MyGovWatch is revolutionizing traditional bid notification and matching by providing RFP leads in more than 200 industries using proprietary artificial intelligence at double the rate of free government sites and at a fraction of the cost of legacy websites. The site offers useful add-on services you can read about at MyGovWatch.com. Why settle for the lead when you can have so much more? Start your free 14-day trial today. Today, our co-host with the co-most is someone I've gotten to know recently because we've been advertising this series on social media and looking for featured guests, and he responded to the call. Mr. Irvin Hughes. Irv, how are you?
Hey, Nick, I'm doing very, very well, man. Listen, I'm excited to be here, man. And I see you've got your Phillies hat going.
Yeah.
And so I want you to know you have totally inspired me to go out and don my Astros regalia, as it were.
Yeah. It's 1980 all over again.
I know, right? That is exactly right. Hey. So just wanted to know, just say, hey, listen, thanks so much for having me on, and thanks for all the work that you're doing out there to help government contractors grow and be successful, man. I really appreciate it.
Well, and you're doing a lot of that as well, and we're going to be talking about that. And I would just say that I'd like to tell the folks who are with us, I'd like to say that it was sort of organic that we both, came up with this, but we're both big baseball fans and decided to make that one of the themes. So everyone has stories related to government contracting, Irv. I'm sure you have a million of them. Before we ask, and I'm going to give you a moment to think about your story, I just want to read your bio for some of the folks who are joining us, and then I'll be asking you about a story that you can tell us about government contracting.
Sure.
So Irvin is a native of Houston, Texas. He's president of American Credit Assurance. He's an award-winning commercial finance and business consultant. He's the founder and president of American Credit Assurance and a managing director at Rainstar Capital Group. He co-hosted the Small Business Today show on the Wall Street Radio Network. As a former commercial banker with more than 25 years of successful experience, he has served more than 4,000 small businesses and arranged more than $100 million in financing nationally. Mr. Hughes has been recognized for his achievements by the U.S. Department of Commerce, Texas Department of Transportation, the NFL's Houston Texans football team, the National Investment Banking Association, and a host of major U.S. corporations and federal, state, and local government agencies. Quite a resume there, Irv. So if you were thinking of maybe one anecdote or one story about government contracting that helps tell people a little bit about your career and some of the interesting things you've seen, what would it be?
Yeah, so Nick, one story comes to mind immediately because I will never forget this. As a government contractor, especially when you decide that you're going to go into the space, we really only have one job to do, and that is to overcome all obstacles between us and our goals, right? And in this particular instance, this was a government contractor who did heavy construction. So this guy had some, pretty heavy pieces of equipment at his facility, but he had this one employee who seemingly at the time had some sort of an alcohol issue or something. At any rate, the guy's on the project and his employee got liquored up really well one particular work day and drove his bulldozer over a cliff.
Wow.
And now the guy wasn't hurt. Okay. So let me be clear about that. The guy was not injured. In fact, when the bulldozer did tip over the cliff, the guy was able to jump out of the equipment. So he didn't go down the ravine there, but it's some 60 feet down. So this bulldozer, if you can imagine, is tumbling down this cliff and rolls down to the bottom. Well, Now the guy who owns the contracting company is trying to figure out what to do, because now he's got to replace this 400 and some $1,000 piece of equipment. He's got to do it in a pretty good hurry. So what does he do? He borrows another bulldozer and buries the bulldozer. Pushes dirt over the top of the bulldozer that was at the bottom of the cliff, buries it, and then he reports it stolen.
Boy, that must be the craziest example of fraud, waste, and abuse in government contracting I've ever heard.
Oh my stars, man! But you know what? The guy filed his claim. He got his money. He got another bulldozer and was able to complete the project. That's the point. But not necessarily the best way to go about handling a challenge like that. But it was such a funny story because I happened to be out there on the guy's property, and the particular day I was out there, how I even got into the story, because the day that I was out there, I'm standing way up here on this cliff and I'm looking down and I can see this bulldozer bucket on top of the ground. And there was I couldn't see an arm or anything attached to it. And I said, why is that bulldozer bucket on top of the ground? And the guy starts to laugh and he tells me the story. And he says, we got to push more dirt over it because we had a massive rainstorm that ran down the side of the cliff. And so what you're seeing is the bucket sticking up out of the ground.
Boy, that's, there's different ways to solve a problem. There's nothing like brute force to solve a problem.
Just brute force, man.
Well, hey, we're going to jump right into it. And folks, if you're on the line with us, if I spoke with you earlier today, we will absolutely get to the content area that you want to talk about. We have a hard stop at 90 minutes, so 2:30 Eastern, depending on where you're at. And if I didn't speak to you earlier, just raise your hand if you want your content area addressed, and we will get to you. So we appreciate your participation today. So, Irv, what are some of the trends that you see happening in the GovCon space right now?
Yeah, great question. Some of the trends that are happening right now is there's a big focus, obviously, everybody's heard about all the spending that's going on in infrastructure. So there's infrastructure spending going on. That's going to be more and more of a trend because that's going on now. Funds have been allocated for that. Also energy and the energy sector, specifically with regard to clean energy. And people being able to get into that particular space. And then, believe it or not, a heck of a lot less sexy, but the supply chain. And so just good old goods, durable goods is the third trend that we're seeing out there in the GovCon space. And there's a real push in the supply chain right now. Everybody's heard about the supply chain problems that's been going on for some time now. As those challenges start to relax, one of the things that we found is now with some of the new legislation that's been passed, allowing government agencies now to buy on what's called commercial platforms. That's really a game changer for a lot of people who want the opportunity to be able to maybe augment their income or add something to their existing business model. Where they can literally adjust their business model to add an e-commerce element to it to be able to sell products directly to government agencies. So,
are you seeing that the things that you're mentioning, is this federally or at the state and local level also?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that because you're absolutely right. So yeah, that's initiated at the federal level. But what I'm getting at is, in translation, when we say government, we're talking about all government. We're talking about all 7 different levels of government. So we're talking about federal agencies, state agencies, county and city departments, public transit authorities, port authorities, independent school districts, colleges and universities. So we're talking about all different levels of government. And I think that, to your point in asking the question, not just federal, and I think unfortunately a lot of government contractors tend to gravitate or even pigeonhole themselves in selling their products and services at one level, but they don't necessarily look at the entire government space.
Absolutely true. I mean, we have 24 different types of government buyers on the MyGovWatch website.
Yeah.
And it never ceases to amaze me how the same product or service you may think may have an application in one place, but it can be all over the place.
No, you're exactly right. One example comes to mind. I have a client in Fredericksburg, Texas. She's 70 years old, and she sells diapers to the state of Texas. And she sources these diapers from this little outfit called Kimberly Clark. And so she literally drop ships these diapers to these different locations around the state of Texas, for Texas Health and Human Services. And so when a lot of times I think when people think about opportunities in the government space, they don't necessarily get the whole concept that government agencies generally don't make anything. They buy everything.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. And that sort of leads into a second question I had, because ultimately there's a lot of folks who are interested in getting involved in government who are not yet, and they can tap into some of the things that you're saying. So what are some of the challenges that you see that small business face if they're new to the GovCon space? And that you can maybe give us some color on that as a segue into, we'll be talking to a woman by the name of Brandy Lynn Hawley, who was actually in the webinar 3 times. So Brandy Lynn, we'll try to figure out which one of the instances. Will the real Brandy Lynn please stand up? We're going to try to make it happen. So go ahead with that, Irv, and we will figure out how to get Brandy Lynn in.
Yeah, I think somebody that's brand new, that's kind of getting into the space, I think a couple of things that are things that they'll have to overcome. One of them, obviously, is making the initial investments. While these initial investments aren't terribly expensive, expensive, right, is relative, right? Somebody who already makes pretty good income, $10,000 may not be that expensive. For somebody who is, perhaps needing to augment their income, $10,000 can be very expensive. And I use $10,000 just as a round number. That's not something that necessarily any one person has to do. I mean, when I got started in government contracting, I think I was, 20 years old or so, maybe 22 years old. And so, I started with $500, right? And so it's really, I think, important for folks to understand. The first thing you got to overcome is you got to put together a little bit of a war chest just to cover your setup, make sure that your business is set up correctly and credibly, so that you can go through the registrations and the certifications that you need to get into the space. And then secondly, to be able to source your capability. And what I mean by capability is, obviously, if you're a service company, you've got to be able to shore that up and be able to prove that you're in fact capable of delivering your services. Or if you're in the product business, you're obviously going to want to be able to source those products. And so those are some of the early on, if you're brand new, those are some of the hurdles that you're going to really have to clear to make sure that you can make a good, clean entree into the space.
It's interesting you talk about capabilities, and we see this online all the time in some of the online forums where people are talking about these things. There are some folks who maybe have it a little backwards. They may think, well, I should get government contracts and then I'll have a business. But it doesn't really work that way, does it? You need to have capabilities and show that you know how to do something, whether it be deliver products or provide a service or a combination of both. And then by showing that you have those capabilities, then you will have government contracts if you do everything right at that point. So it's an interesting dynamic to see. Some folks think that sometimes it works the other way. And so without further ado, I'd like to invite Brandy Lynn to join us. And let me see if I can ask Brandy Lynn to unmute, or let's see if I need to do something on this end.
No, it was on my end. How you doing?
Welcome, Brandy Lynn. And I understand someone likes my Phillies hat.
Yes, our team member Heather is a huge Phillies fan.
Fantastic. And does she hail from the Philadelphia area?
Yes, she does.
Fantastic. And where are you joining us from today?
So me and the team, they've all joined virtually. I'm currently at a hospital with a dear friend. But we're in Las Vegas. And so I'm with S2 Research. I'm project manager. I really think that I probably should have made Matt, the boss, sign up for this, but we are a research and marketing firm, S2, and we constantly go out for RFPs in our local area, but we're able and capable of fulfilling research and marketing, but mainly research for the RFPs. So we've actually, did we do the Chicago one? No, we didn't. But yeah, so we're here to find out more about learning about RFPs, getting ourselves out there in front of people so that we can have more working opportunities.
Well, that's fantastic. And it's a great topic for the webinar. So we're talking about how to aggressively pursue government contracts beyond some of the local things that you've been seeing. So how have you been hearing about the local opportunities? And when you say you've been responding to things locally, do you mean public and private or just public?
I need Matt right now. So we've done transportation, that's government, correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, we responded to a transportation one. We've done Las Vegas Visitor Authority. We responded to their RFP, but we don't see enough come across. Every time we see one though, airports and governor's office, he says.
Someone's texting you, yeah?
Yeah, he
Okay.
says it to me.
Well, I can tell you that there are 259 open RFPs right now that simply reference research in the title of the RFP, at least on our website at MyGovWatch.com. And I would say that, one of the things that you should be looking at is having a service that aggregates everything for you so you hear about things in real time. And in terms of your capabilities, one thing that people need to understand who may be working in a local area, especially a professional discipline like research, you should not make the assumption that they will only hire you locally in the Las Vegas metropolitan area. Go ahead.
Oh, we for sure know that. We do nationally, internationally. We do a lot of research projects with tech companies, healthcare companies, where we're going all over the US. So we definitely know that we are not just here in Vegas. We have the whole world at our fingertips.
Yeah, and so is it a question of the number of opportunities that you're hearing about? Is that really what this is about? Or are you looking at
we're not hearing about it. It's not getting to us.
Okay. Well, we have 259 that are open right now, but let's make a distinction between responding to RFPs, which is something that every company in the GovCon space needs to do, and on one hand, and on the other hand, developing relationships with people who may ultimately be reviewing the responses to those RFPs. And I see Herb nodding his head. Herb, do you want to take that a little further?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, Brendan, thanks so much for getting on here and joining us and inviting your team. Listen, you guys, if you're providing research, let me tell you what, doing research is extremely, extremely valuable, especially in the GovCon space, right? And what I was going to just throw out there is a lot of people who get in the GovCon space are very reactive. In other words, they have great businesses, great capability, but they're waiting for opportunities to hit the street. And one of the things I would just throw out there, that one of the things that has helped me grow my GovCon business over these many years is I am very, very proactive. And what I mean is there's a fair amount of work that I'm doing long before a particular bid opportunity ever even hits the street. And that's kind of what Nick was alluding to, is that fostering those relationships with those people that you can do your best work for, that should be an ongoing process. And to be clear, oftentimes when opportunities do come out on the street, it's because I'm the one who's caused it to come out. And so I would just throw that out there that, yeah, you might want to make sure that with what you guys do, you know, in your marketing and in your relationship building, make sure that you're being really, really proactive and sort of carry the banner, if you will, about the benefits and your value proposition for being able to provide those research services to those agencies.
Couple of questions, Brandy Lynn. Are the services that you provide generally of a one-time nature, or are they often recurring, or both?
We would love for every service to be recurring, because then you can weigh the data against each other. But a lot of our clients are project-based. We do have repeat clients though. Sometimes they come to us with a different project. But we absolutely think that there's value in looking at where you are a year from now, and so on and so forth.
Okay, it's useful to know that, because if it's a recurring contract on our website, you can do open records requests through us, where we're helping you be anonymous and find out what is happening with the recurring contract. So to the extent you can identify existing contracts, we can help fill in the knowledge gap for those. Now, in terms of some other opportunities, are you interested in federal as well? Are you doing anything federally?
I don't know that we're doing anything federal now. We're interested in work. We're interested in research. We're interested in data. We're interested in dashboards and visualizing that data.
Yeah.
Like we're passionate about all of that.
Okay, I would add this to the conversation. I don't know what the average ticket item is for when you have a scope of work that you're completing, but different government agencies, I think by state, have purchasing thresholds below which they do not even need to go to RFP. Are you aware of that?
No.
Okay.
No, I want to just say, just so that this is clear, I found you guys because I was on the search for RFPs about a week ago.
Fantastic. Fantastic. So think of it this way. If the government is buying something very large, an extremely complicated research project over a number of years, they have to put it out to an RFP because it follows purchasing policies set at the state level and also at the local level. They have to follow those policies and procedures. But if it's at below the purchasing threshold that requires an open bid process, you can make a direct sale. And that might even be a strategy to use where you say, okay, well, if I'm aware that this is the threshold in the state of Nevada, or if this is the threshold in the state of Las Vegas, I'm going to go find different people who may have a need, and I'm going to sell them something that's just below that threshold. And that's a great way to get in. Now, only because of the number of people we have, I'm just going to say, do you mind if we come back to you later if there are follow-up questions?
Absolutely.
Okay, fantastic. And please stay with us. The way to hear about the next webinar, and this is for everyone, is to have at least a free basic edition on MyGovWatch. You'll hear about this webinar series every month as different people come around. And so we will come back to you, Brandy Lynn, if you stay with us and if you'd like to ask a follow-up question. Thanks for joining us. So Irv, this sort of leads us to another topic that I wanted to talk about, and it has to do with the approach to government contracting. So should new and current contractors rethink their approach to government contracting with the way the world has been changing?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a great question, because all of us have to rethink our approach. And and to be clear, when I'm talking about an approach, I'm talking about how are you going to approach your GovCon business with regard to growth. And that requires a little bit of thought there, a little forethought, if you will, because as I mentioned earlier, being proactive, that's a mind shift, so to speak, because now the truth is just what you were saying. There's a lot of opportunity that you can create for yourself that is literally under most of these agencies' informal thresholds, right? So the procurement threshold, even understanding where those numbers are. For some agencies, it's $50,000. For some agencies, it's $100,000. Well, the truth is, if you can be proactive, now you can get in there, you can form those relationships, you can find out what those procurement methods are that the agency generally uses, You can find out what kinds of value you can bring to the agency. And then most of these agencies, the path forward, what I mean by changing your approach is, the approach should be that you go into the agency with the understanding of what the agency does, what it is they buy, whatever those products or services are, and just follow the money. I'm always a proponent that going into an agency, when you're targeting an agency, you really need to go after money that the agency is already spending and compete for that, right? And so what is going to be your value proposition over and above other than price? In other words, is it your availability? Is it warranty? Is it training? Is it installation? What other kinds of value can you bring to the agency over and above price? And that's really, really important in the proactive process. And then making sure that you're connecting with the right people inside of the agency.
And just as a follow-up to that, I totally agree with what you're saying. And things have been changing. And I wonder if you agree with this. Do you see what some of our customers and users see is that it's just harder to get to people because it's not a touchy-feely personal sort of business world anymore? Are you hearing that?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting we're talking about this because all of our customers are all over the country, and frankly, since the pandemic, we found that you don't get the benefit of all of the personal touch that you used to get, but you can move so much faster now with the technology, like what we're doing here now, or in a webinar or in a video call that actually leads up to maybe a personal meeting. And then let's not forget the conferences. A lot of these government agencies really struggle trying to capture spending with small businesses. And that's why they host all these trainings and workshops and conferences. And I would just say, make sure you go to those things and actually meet those people. So when there's an opportunity to get out and actually meet some people in the procurement space, by all means, you want to do that.
Well, absolutely. And I would just add to that, because it's harder to get to people, you can always do open records requests. And this is something we offer on the site, because especially if you're selling something that a particular government agency buys, you can find out what their needs are by finding out what are they paying for those products or services. What are the budgets for those? Who's involved in that? It's amazing when you do an open records request, whether it's through us or if you do it yourself, you can find out who is evaluating the bids in the different bid processes for exactly what you sell. So that should be said. I'd like to join someone by the name of Jeremy Strickland to join us. I'd like to invite Jeremy to join and ask him to unmute, and so that we can talk about something that'll lead into some conversations about the competitive bid process as it relates to pricing and engineering and construction. So Jeremy, are you with us? And we just need you to unmute. Okay, we will come back to Jeremy. And what I'd like to do is just change gears here, and let's talk to Ismail. And I'd like to invite Ismail to join us. Are you there, Ismail? Okay. So Ismail, you can play around with your audio and video settings, and maybe if you're able, we can come back to you, and we'll go to Jaideep and ask Jaideep to join us and unmute your microphone.
Hi there.
Hello, Jaideep. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Thank you for joining us. Where are you joining us from and what do you do?
I am joining from Philadelphia.
Philadelphia. So I'm not sure if you're a fan, but I'm probably not far from where you are.
Yes, I saw your hat.
So what does your company do?
We provide support for supply chain and procurement transformation across the world, definitely in the US and the state government.
Fascinating. And it sounds like a significant part of your business is probably related to government contracting, or would it be all of it?
No, we do private and public sector both.
Okay. And I know you were interested in talking a little bit about management of diversity suppliers. And just for anyone who may not be familiar with this concept, in order to perform a lot of these contracts, especially at the federal level, certainly at the state level for larger cities, you need to include different types of companies as subcontractors with meeting different socioeconomic categories. So what is your challenge there, Jaideep?
My challenge is to know how is government entities managing the spend against the diversity vendors if they are on a contract. Because being a diversity vendor, they are not the prime on the contract. It's predominantly they are the sub on the contract. So how are agencies and government entities managing that spend? Because we hear a lot from the subcontractors that they don't get paid and prime is not paying them because of various reasons, right? So how does the agencies or procurement officers make sure that the compliance is being met? Maybe initially the contract was awarded to the vendor, to the prime, because they had a sub who was a diversity vendor, right? So how do agencies manage that? Is it a paper-based process? Is there a systems? Are they putting some processes? I want to understand more on that concept.
Yeah. I mean, it's a great question, a great topic. Irv, I'm going to start with this and maybe you can come in with some other thoughts. But I think it really depends on what is the government agency in question, right? And I would like to say that if you're talking about the federal government, it would be nice to think that they're all doing exactly the same thing because they have the same regulations related to this type of thing in the FAR. Now, although they're supposed to be following all of the same rules and regulations, my experience, at least with the federal government agencies that me and the customers I've dealt with have had to interact with as it relates to reporting subcontracting revenue and attainment of different goals, it's completely all over the board. It really becomes a function of how organized or what are the resources that government agency has on that part of their contract administration function. And we've just seen it all over the board. Now, you have, I think it's the contractor performance reporting system at the federal level, but we have really seen it literally all over the board in terms of how well different types of government agencies are managing that. Now, you do have the SBA scorecards at the federal level where they're taking data at the department level and rolling it up into dollar spending for prime and sub spending. And then they are grading their agency level reporters on the degree of attainment they have against federal goals. And that's annual. But I think you're really talking about at the contract level. And I really do think it depends on who is involved with that particular contract. Irv, do you have ideas on this?
Yeah, Jaideep, one of the things that you want to pay attention to is when you're a subcontractor, oftentimes that means that the prime is going to have to list you as a subcontractor under what's called a subcontracting plan. And so it would be you and whomever else might be a subcontractor on a particular contract. Now, I have seen those to what Nick is saying. I've seen those done on paper. I've seen them done electronically online. And with regard to getting paid, when you're a first tier sub, it's really, really important for you to know who the compliance officers are in that particular agency. And part of that has to do with you. and I'll be perfectly candid with you, is that without a subcontractor being able to contact a compliance officer and the contracting officer, yes, you would do that simultaneously if you're having trouble being paid from a particular prime. And so remember, the agency is trying to, the reason why the agency needs to know if in fact something like that is happening is because they're supposed to be tracking and capturing the spending that the prime is obligated to pay to the subcontractor in order to capture the spending toward those goals, right? So having said that, oftentimes what we find is that subcontractors are fairly reluctant to say, hey, what's going on here? But that's not a conversation that you have until after you have tried to resolve whatever the issue might be between you and the prime. And then if the prime is, you're not able to achieve some level of agreement with how that's supposed to work, you can certainly request an opportunity for the agency now to intervene with a compliance officer, your prime contractor, and yourself to come to the table to make sure that everybody is clear on not only how it's supposed to work, but more importantly, you can even get records. You can request records on knowing when the prime is being paid, because this often can happen when you're a subcontractor and you're entering into a subcontract with a prime that's got, pay when paid kinds of language in the subcontract.
Jaideep, are you a small business?
Yes.
Okay, and are you looking at this through the lens of a subcontractor, a prime contractor, or both?
I'm looking from both standpoints, where a prime is there and there are a bunch of, let's say, diversity vendors on the project, or other way where I am the sub and a prime is someone else.
So there is something for small businesses that I will have to look this up later, but I think it might be called the Prompt Payment Act, where small businesses are required to be paid on a timely basis. And that, I believe, has language that causes that to flow down to subcontractors. That's one thing that you should know about, and you might want to look into that. The other thing is there's a little bit of a catch-22 here, and it depends on how helpful the contracting officer wants to be, because we have also seen cases where a subcontractor is not being treated the way they should be by their prime contractor. And if they go to the contracting officer, they will hide behind the excuse that the government does not have privity of contract. They're not in a contract with the sub.
Exactly.
They're only in a contract with the prime. So it sounds like maybe you've come up against that.
Yes, I've come across both situations, and that's why I'm trying to understand, as both of you said, that they have some electronic systems. Like, what is that system? Is it homegrown systems? Is it some Excel or spreadsheet that the contract officer manages? What is that? So
I think federally, you will be able to find, and I can help you find this after the webinar if you reach out, but you'll be able to find what is the correct procedure they're supposed to follow federally. But you're going to find when you start talking to people that they don't always do that. And I think that's really the challenge. But we can identify and help you identify what is the system they're supposed to be using. And then if it's in a different jurisdiction, whether it be a state or a local thing, it's going to be a totally different answer. But you can always do open records requests to find out after the fact what did happen. But I think what you're really looking for is the real-time reporting, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, real-time reporting, or some kind of a dispute management system that the state or federal is using to resolve issues between prime and subs. I'm not aware of a dispute management system. Irv, are you?
No, I'm really not. But one of the things I was going to throw out there is you might do some research on a group called a product called B2G now. That's one that's pretty widely used by agencies. And I don't have their direct information, but I would start there, and then do some research on all of the platforms that kind of compete with a B2G now.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Good.
Yeah.
And Jaideep, feel free to reach out after the webinar and we can take this a little bit further, and we can either cover it in more detail in a subsequent webinar.
Great. Thank you so much for taking my call.
Yep. Thank you for joining. So Ismail, I want to see if we can get you to join us with audio. See if I can promote you to a panelist. So Ismail, if you're there, we'd like you to try to unmute. Otherwise, we'll circle back. So Irv, while we're waiting for Ismail, I just have to ask you this. How do you think the Astros match up with the Yankees, number one? And how is this Astros team different than some of the great teams from the past 5 years? How has it evolved?
Well, you got to think about the big strength in the Astros organization now is the new ownership over the past several years. We had an ownership change, and that particular owner has invested heavily in the Astros farm system. And that was something that was lacking for many, many years until that ownership change happened. And so now when you take a look at, the Astros have made it to the ALCS literally 6 years in a row. Okay. And the path to the ALCS comes through New York. And of course, they've been able to, over the past few years, been able to beat the Yankees in Yankee Stadium in each of these series. So I will tell you, there is absolutely some rivalry going on between the Astros and the Yankees. And that's why I'm so excited about that opportunity for the Astros to meet the Yankees. I do think that they match up really, really well. When you look at Aaron Judge and what he's been able to do, and then, of course, the Astros has their own version of Aaron Judge with Yordan Alvarez, who literally, came up through the Astros, came up from AAA to where, he got a roster spot. The same thing with Jeremy Pena, came up through the Astros farm system. And so when you look at Carlos Correa from days past, Jose Altuve, when you look at these folks all came through the Astros farm system, and that's how strong it is. And then lastly, I think it's going to be a really, really great series, I think, because the Astros bullpen, I think, matches up nicely with the Yankees bullpen. And of course, the Yankees have Garrett Cole, who was a former Astro, right, pitching for them now. And so yeah, it's going to be fun. That's for sure.
Well, I'm shifting some things around here, and I just remember that a gentleman who's going to be joining us, I think maybe also is in your neck of the woods. Dominique, it looks like maybe there's a Houston shirt, and if you want to join us with your audio.
Go Stros. H-Town. Get it back. What's up, Irv?
Hey, what's going on, Dominique?
Nothing much.
Hey, thanks for joining us. And I just want to sort of set the table for why you're joining us. So you wanted to talk about proposals. And Irv, I wanted to sort of lead that discussion with a conversation about how can government contractors be more effective at competitive bidding. And maybe, the way that we talk about this subject could be a good segue into some of Dominique's questions about proposals.
Yeah, absolutely. In a competitive bid scenario, to be more effective, man, you really got to start work long before a particular bid comes out. And what I mean by that is, when you get an opportunity and you're putting proposals out there, first of all, I hope you have a standard proposal, for lack of a better term, template that you use, because to be effective, you really got to be able to get proposals out quickly. I think that's the thing that gives a lot of people heartburn, is that they don't necessarily build out a standardized proposal boilerplate, so that, you know, depending on the scope of work you're going after, where it's very quick and easy for you to, upload, write the RFP and then get it out the door, right? And if you've done the legwork up front, and legwork meaning that you form those relationships, you've been proactive about understanding what the scope of work is going to be, then now it's just a matter of putting the proposals out there. And something else that we talked about was, let's not forget that each of these agencies at all these different levels have different thresholds. And so you can have proposals that go out almost immediately, where you're not necessarily having to go out for a competitive bid. And then even if you do trigger a competitive bid, well, guess what? Good news for you. If you've done your homework, you've pretty much set the bar for what the specification and the scope of work is going to be.
Well, and as part of this conversation, I think I would agree with all of that. Or a question for Dominique: what business are you in, and what do you do?
I just got into the contracting space, the government contracting space. So at this point, I'm just trying to figure out like how to do more like strategic partnerships and come in, and I want to be able to go after these opportunities and bring them to my partners. I have a pretty big network in Houston from the guys with the Texans. I know a lot of guys that used to play for the Texans, so those will be some of my partners. I have other guys that do construction work. And so what I want to do is kind of be more so like the middleman, and I go after these opportunities, and I want to learn how to expedite the proposal process to where, you know, we're able to go after multiple opportunities within a month and present them to my clients.
Gotcha.
Well, I think, go ahead, Irv. I'm sorry.
Gotcha. So Dominic, you have a kind of a unique model. Your model is more consultative, because the folks that you're serving are actually the folks who are going to do the work. And so you're positioning yourself now to be able to bring the work and then bring the opportunities to them, which I absolutely love that model. I think you're spot on to position yourself that way. And I would just say, yeah, there's some front end work that you're going to need to do so that you can get really efficient at that. But I will just have to put it out there, man. There's some steps that you got to take to make sure you're positioned right so that you can capitalize on that. And look, here's the shameless plug. Since you're here in H-Town, be sure and reach out.
Most definitely. I love to see that. When I saw that Astro, I was telling my partner, we're leaving out of Florida. We came down here to do some work with FEMA, and they shut us down. So we're driving back to Houston right now. But I was telling them, I was like, look, that guy's he's from Houston, man. We got to tap in with him when we get back. And he gave all your credentials or whatnot. And so, yeah, we most definitely need to tap in. Like I said, I got a lot of connections down in Houston that, we probably could both, make some money together. And I'm just looking to grow and expand my network. So, yeah, I love the fact that you're in Houston, Irv. So we most definitely need to sit down, go to lunch or something, and see how we can work together.
Hey, man, absolutely. All for it, man.
Well, Dominique, I just wanted to put a few things on the table myself. So you're talking about pass-through scenarios, and there's really just a couple of different things you want to think about there. So if you are do you do services, products, or both?
I'm looking at doing both. Like I said, more so on, like I said, I'm tapped in with the Texans, pretty connected with those guys. So I'm looking to help them, the guys that aren't playing anymore, invest their money and start making money through the government contracting sector, to where I can come in and consult them. I have a partner who does RFPs and things like that, bringing them in, getting these guys business with the, whether it be minority-owned business, women-owned business, getting all their certs and stuff, getting them in place to go after these contracts. For me to go after the contracts for them.
So you're going to want to look into what are the restrictions on pass-throughs federally and at the state and local level. In some cases, certainly it's not a big deal if someone's selling products, if they're drop shipping or whatever, or what have you. But in service scenarios, you want to be careful, because a lot of times there's a specific language, whether it be a regulation or something in the bid, where they'll say what percentage of the work do you have to self-perform. So that's something you want to look into, depending on what level of contracting you're looking at. You're also going to want to work with your attorney or some other consultant that might have a legal background on joint venturing schemes and scenarios, populated versus unpopulated joint ventures. It sounds like that's something you're going to want to sink your teeth into. And it sounds like you're already familiar with the idea of having the ability to respond to RFPs, which is a significant soft cost in all of this. There's always a need to have someone sitting in front of a computer putting the actual bid together, and it sounds like you already know that.
And Dominique, exactly what Nick is saying. You have to be mindful of something called a commercially useful function, and that's what Nick's getting at. Is that in certain scenarios, certain contracting opportunities, there is literally a percentage of work that you have to self-perform, or else you can really get wrapped around the axle with regard to being seen as a pass-through. And so structure is something that I can absolutely help you do, so we can standardize how you go about doing that. So yeah, I'm looking forward to us getting together, sir.
Most definitely, man. Like I said, I was super excited to see that Stroh's head on your head. Oh yeah, we got to connect with this brother when we get back. Yes.
Well, if you guys end up in Philadelphia for the World Series, then I'm buying it.
Okay. We coming. We're gonna win that thing this year. So second place ain't bad, but it ain't first.
That's right.
Well, thanks for joining us, Dominique, and please hang out. And if you have any follow-up questions, jump back in. So
thank you.
I wanted to invite someone by the name of Julie Daly to join us. Julie, can you hear us?
Yes.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. And what's your business and where are you calling from?
I am in Phoenix, Arizona. I am, however, brokenhearted today because I am a Cleveland Indians fan.
Well, sorry to hear that.
Yeah, yesterday was a hard day. I work for a firm that does a lot of government contracting, both in the US and in Canada. We service debt collection and call center and some technology help desk.
Well, fantastic. And I'm connecting you with, it sounds like you're a user organization of our site already, so welcome to the call. And were there any specific topics that you wanted to talk about today?
We're just really looking at improving our proposal processes. We do have templates that we use. I'm, excuse me, senior proposal coordinator, and I work in conjunction with our corporate communications manager, who I believe is on the call as well. And we're just looking for ways to improve both how we find RFPs that we want to respond to and how we develop our responses to them. Right now we're working on improving our the look and feel of our proposals, and kind of our, as you talked about earlier, our boilerplate content and resumes and past project write-ups and things of that nature.
Well, and this is fantastic that you're bringing this up. You happen to be operating, and I know you already know this, you happen to be operating in an industry where MyGovWatch offers what we call premium services, where we are automatically getting copies of winning proposals. Whenever we hear about something in your industries, we don't have many of the premium markets, but you're in one of them. So that is one way that people in those premium markets are using the site to be able to see what competitors are saying in their proposals, to see how far they take things with graphics, to see how long their response is for item A versus B versus C. And even though we don't offer this service in every industry, if you're on the webinar with us today, you can develop this kind of information too by doing, again, open records requests, which is something we come back to all the time. It's really a window into seeing what the competition's doing, and you can get copies of your competitors' proposals. That's a great way to see if what you're developing and putting into your boilerplate is competitive, Julian. I wonder if that's helpful.
We've just gotten started with your platform, and one of the reasons we wanted to check it out was exactly for that functionality. We do have one of our team members who I believe is also on the call, and part of her role is to go in and look for those things, look at the open records requests, look at pull up past proposals, especially from accounts that we did not win ourselves, even though we responded. So that is definitely something that we are interested in pursuing.
Yeah, it's a tremendously important part of the bid process or of the sales process. And it's something that, and I know you're a significant organization, it's something that smaller companies really struggle with. The typical smaller company doesn't even have someone in your role. So it bodes well for your success that you are in that role, because it elevates the importance of that business function in a way that doesn't guarantee success, but it guarantees you're going to be in the ballpark, to use an analogy, a lot more frequently. Irv, do you have maybe something to add to that?
Yeah, Julie, first of all, congratulations and kudos to you for taking the steps to make your organization better and more effective at going after those kinds of opportunities. In developing sort of your boilerplate, one of the things that I've done in the past, and if you've got organizations, maybe governments, agencies, even local, that you've got a relationship with, I actually had some of my small business representatives connect me to procurement people inside the agencies, and then literally get a meeting and share the development of our proposal template. And so what we did in step one is, of course, we did our research, exactly what Nick is saying, so that we could look at what was winning. But then I would just recommend maybe one other step is, once you've made those improvements or changes in your boilerplate, use that as an excuse to get a meeting, to literally have a sit down and have somebody in your local area go over a sample, air quotes, sample of your proposal, and ask them questions about what is meaningful and relevant in the content of your boilerplate.
That's definitely something we will think about doing in the future once we get all of our processes in place.
Yeah.
And Julie, assuming you continue to do business with us, and even if you don't, I'm available, emails, calls, what have you. If you're trying to figure a specific thing out, I'm always a phone call or an email away.
Well, thank you. We will probably want to be taking you up on that.
And hopefully the Phillies will be facing Cleveland in next year's World Series.
We've got an exciting young team. I hope that's the case. They're a lot of fun to watch.
And that's actually something else that should be said. I've been visiting different ballparks, and I would love to go to Cleveland. And I'm sure everyone tells you they'd love to go to Houston, because just seeing that park on television, it's beautiful.
It absolutely is. Here we call, it's Minute Maid Park, but of course here the locals, we call it the juice box.
Perfect. So we're just about at an hour. We have another 30 minutes available. I'm going to ask you one more question, Irv, and then we're going to sort of move this to an open Q&A format. So anyone who's still with us, you can raise your hand now, and we will, bring you in. You can talk a little bit about what your business does, and see if we can help you in some way with your interest in this space. So Irv, why do you recommend government contracting as a business strategy at all for a small business? I mean, there's lots of opportunities in the private space why should every small business be looking at government?
Yeah, so yeah, obviously there's small business opportunities that is in the private sector, but I would suggest that, and I'm not by any means saying ignore the private sector. What I am saying though is that public sector opportunities should be a part of your overall business model. And the reason why is because it allows you the opportunity to be able to it allows you to go after opportunities that even if you're a brand new business, if you're a startup, it allows you to go out and start going after opportunities to capture spending because government agencies as a customer is really, really a good thing. Why? Because one, they have the money to pay you with, and two, they're legally bound to pay you for the work or products or services that you've provided. So when you stop and think about it, and I'm gonna just put this out here, Nick, for our listeners, is that the name of the game in government, guys, is capturing spending. That's the name of the game. And so if you're a small business, if you're a woman-owned business, if you're a veteran-owned business, if you're otherwise a minority business, you know, getting those certifications and going through all of the pain and hassle of doing that. Everybody tells me it's a pain, yes. And everybody tells me it's a hassle, yes. And it's also worth it, yes. So when you've gone through the steps, now you've positioned yourself to be able to have some of the largest, best customers that you can have, and that is government agencies that owe you money. You're literally participating in a system that we're all forced to pay into. And so I would offer this just as food for thought. Here in the United States, government agencies basically take in revenue, you know, three different ways: taxes, fines, or fees. And so we're all obligated in some way to pay into this system of government. But oftentimes, if you're not selling in the government space, you're also not capturing or benefiting from some of those taxes, fines, and fees that you're paying into. And so that's why I recommend everybody to look, and I will just say it like this, Nick, even if your government contracting is going to start out to be a side hustle for you, you still owe it to yourself to start your business and get in the game, go through all the learning curve. You're going to have some learning curve, but you know, back when we started, you know, we didn't have a MyGovWatch. We didn't have a Nick or shameless plug, an Irv to help guide us through all of the different traps and things that we were going to experience. You know, one of the things that's made me an expert is I figured out every which way that won't work. So
You really put interesting bookends around it, the way that you talk about approaching government opportunities, Irv, because when you really think about it, if you're dealing only with private sector customers, any of your private sector customers can be bought, they can go out of business, anything can happen. But I don't think the state of New Jersey or the city of Houston are going to be going out of business anytime soon. So even if it's a small part of your business, it seems wise to look at it as something you should be trying to chip away at, even if it's 10 or 15% of your business.
Well, no, that's it, and that's exactly my point, Nick. Is that, you know, one of my clients, for example, has built probably an $800,000 a year business, and she's never competitively bid ever. And you got to stop and think about that's because every bid, every RFP that she submits is informal. And I mean, she's doing this where just about, you know, I chuckled because just about every one of her proposals, you know, here in Texas, most of our agencies have an informal threshold around $50,000. right? And so all of her, miraculously, amazingly, just about all of her proposals fall between $40,000 and $50,000.
Wow. What a coincidence.
Amazing, isn't it?
Well, this has been great. We're just over an hour. I'm going to encourage anyone who's still with us, and there's still a number of people who haven't chimed in. I'm just going to turn on everyone to allow you to talk if you haven't joined us, and you can take us up on that or not. But I'm just going to promote everyone, and let's just see if anything comes out, and we'll take some Q&A. And while we're waiting for anyone to jump in, Herb, I would just say maybe it's time that I ask you to just talk a little bit more in general about what your business actually does and what does a typical user organization of your financing look like?
Yeah, okay. Well, thank you for that. Yeah, so American Credit Assurance is a purchase order finance company that finances government purchase orders in the supply chain. Most contractors, most business people are reasonably familiar with what the U.S. Small Business Administration does. That the SBA actually doesn't loan money directly unless it's a disaster loan. But the core of their business is they provide credit guarantees on behalf of the borrower to a bank. So if you apply for a loan and the bank wants to hedge their risk, then they will get an SBA guarantee to guarantee some percentage of the proceeds for your loan. And that's how your loan is able to be approved through SBA. Well, with American Credit Assurance, we do almost exactly that, where we come in the supply chain. And if you're selling commercial products, say, for example, to a government agency, so whether that's materials, whether that's supplies, equipment, whatever those commodities might be, if your supplier is having you to pay cash up front to fulfill a particular purchase order that you may have gotten, we found that for many small businesses, that kind of transaction is simply not sustainable, because it can really inhibit your growth and cause big time cash flow problems. Because every time you get a purchase order, now you've got to submit cash up front to fulfill the order. And that's typically because you don't have credit established in the name of the business with your supplier. So what we do at American Credit Assurance is we step in, you would apply with us. We would, if you're approved, and then we would provide you with a particular credit limit. Our credit limits go from $10,000 up to $250,000. And what we would do is, as you're getting into the supply chain, we would basically be your guarantor to guarantee payment on your behalf to your suppliers, so that you're not having to come out of pocket to pay cash up front every time you're awarded a purchase order.
And is this exclusively on product orders? I know in some service industries, there's labor costs that, that are happening before revenue. So are you doing service as well?
Yeah, so what we do, we don't do services directly. So, but the good news is a lot of our clients are service-oriented companies that are adding commercial products to their business model. That's number one. But oftentimes we, because we are a lender, we have a pretty significant syndicate of lenders that we work with directly. So let's say, for example, somebody's in a service business, they may not be selling commercial products at all, but they're needing a working capital line so that they can continue to meet their payroll requirements or mobilization requirements or whatever those things might be. So what we do is they would still apply with us. And then what we would do is we would then take that package. We have a great online system, literally, that allows you to go online, upload all of your documentation, fill out your application, and so on. And then we syndicate that. By the way, you can use that system completely free of charge, but it allows you to assemble all of your documents, your applications, all of your tax returns, or whatever else is required, all in one place. And then we now can invite our syndicate partners to take a look at that. And that's how we're able to facilitate getting access to capital, even if you are just I shouldn't say just, but even if you are a service company, whether you're selling products or not.
It's a fascinating model, and it just proves once again, the market finds a way. And if there's a need, especially for capital, someone will find a way to do that, regardless of the amount of capital, right? And regardless of what the need is for. There must be a lot of, and by the way, we have a question from Dominique, and Dominique, we're going to ask you to join us again in a second, but there must be a lot of suppliers to government contractors that simply do not understand the dynamics of government contracting. Is that so?
Yeah, well, it's interesting you bring up the question about suppliers, because you're absolutely right. And suppliers generally have two problems with dealing with small businesses sourcing products for government. Problem number one is many of the suppliers have some pretty large minimum order quantities, or MOQs. And so what happens is, the problem number one is small companies oftentimes can't buy enough product to allow some of the larger suppliers to actually sell to them or drop ship to them. And let me be clear, we're talking about drop shipping. We're not necessarily talking about your warehousing. We're saying you would generate a purchase order, and you would put your purchase order out to your supplier, and then your supplier would ship the product directly to your agency customer. So that's the transaction we're talking about here. So the first problem is, can you generate orders large enough to attract the attention of a supplier who can drop ship? And then second is, if you got, for example, $100,000 purchase order for widgets, right? And you've gotten a quote from your supplier of $80,000. Well, what you'll get down to is, now you've won this purchase order, you've got a cost of $80,000 in there, and now you're going to send this purchase order and say, hey, listen, go ahead and ship my widgets. And what the supplier generally is going to do is say, well, as soon as you can wire us $80,000, we're going to ship those widgets. And so every time that transaction happens, you've either got two choices. One, you drain your bank account and fire off $80,000 ACH or a wire to your supplier and hope they ship. And that's the key, hope they ship, because now once you prepay a supplier for a government order, you've got zero leverage. Why? Because they've got your money and the product. Okay. The other thing is that if you have credit established, net terms, 30-day terms, with your supplier, one of the challenges you can have is, even if you've got net terms, like a lot of people, frankly, Nick, they have net terms of, $5,000, $10,000, but here comes a purchase order for $100,000, where your cost is now $80,000. And so how are you going to make up that gap? Generally, what they'll do is say, well, you need to submit a deposit or pay the difference up front. And so really that's where we come in and say, look, no, we're going to issue a payment guarantee for 100% of whatever that cost is. And as soon as the product ships, we'll get a ship confirmation, and then we release the funds to pay your supplier, pay you, and everybody else. So that's
it's a no-brainer. It's a no-brainer that anybody who is involved in government contracting, at a minimum, they should have you in their Rolodex.
yeah, absolutely, because it's going to happen. You don't need us, even if you don't need us today, you still need to know who we are, and you still need to start building some business credit. And that's probably the other thing that we do that we don't talk about nearly, we don't do nearly as good a job as we should, is, we provide a fair amount of training and education on building business credit up front. Because one of the things that we found is a lot of contractors get into the space, even if you're a service contractor, you still need to set your company up where it can stand on its own credit-wise, because one of the things that we find is a lot of contractors use their personal credit to cover business expenses while they're growing. And the next thing you know, you're leveraged credit-wise. Now you got all this debt that you're carrying personally. Now your personal credit scores goes down. And that's what happens if you're successful. So you really got to be careful how you go about managing that.
Well, it sounds like maybe Dominique could use some additional advice in a particular area. Dominique, I'm just going to ask you to unmute and join us again.
Can y'all hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay, so Herb, I had a few questions. So the process to, I guess, qualifying for one of your lines of credit, are we looking at, I heard you say tax returns. Are we looking at tax returns and credit score, or what are the, what qualifies and disqualifies a person?
Yeah, so the short answer is that, yeah, we do look at tax returns just to be able to confirm whatever your current cash flow is. As you might guess, even if you're a startup, yes, we'll take a look at personal tax returns, because what we're looking for is how are you generating any kind of revenue, whether that's personal revenue or business or both. So that's what the tax returns are for. We need to be able to gauge what that currently is, because we use that as a benchmark to make sure that you're not going to be upside down from a payment standpoint. And then the second thing we look at is we do take a look at personal credit, but I can tell you that personal credit by itself does not approve or decline an application in our system. Let me tell you why. When we look at a personal credit report, yes, the credit score is a factor in our scoring model. We typically like to see 620 or greater, but I will tell you, we have certainly approved people at 600. We have not approved people at 599. And the other thing that that we do pay attention to is, for example, we had one applicant who had a 760 credit score, but we declined. And so that's what I'm saying, is that the credit score by itself does not approve or decline somebody. It's the credit score plus the cash flow plus kind of what your business model is. There's some factors that go into the qualification. So we just say, look, go ahead and apply. And if it helps you kind of get your head around the concept, we right now, our approval of new applicants is about 88%. So frankly, most people do qualify.
Okay, and then I guess my next question, I have a partner of mine who has a construction company, and he was saying he was having an issue with bonding. Do you do any type of bonding, or do you have any knowledge on that?
I'm actually a resource partner for bonding in the bonding education program for the U.S. Department of Transportation.
Okay, I guess we can have that. Well, I can maybe set up that meeting with you and him, because he's looking for bonding. He's done a couple contracts with the Intercontinental down there. He has a concrete company, so he's been running into issues with just the bonding capability, not being able to go after bigger jobs because he doesn't have the bonding capability.
No, listen, I totally get it. The whole bonding thing is that's why I was saying education, because somebody that's trying to either get bonded for the first time, or if they're already bonded and they're trying to increase their bonding capacity, absolutely reach out to me.
10-4. I think that's all the questions I had for right now. I appreciate your info, man. I really do. Thank you.
Oh, not a problem.
So I do not see anyone else with a hand raised, Irv. If anyone has any other questions, we can take them now. And if not, we can wrap it up. Okay.
Well, I was just going to say, guys, if you do want to reach out, connect with me, please go to www.aca, stands for American Credit Assurance, but you want to go to aca.credit, not .com, but aca.credit. And you can click on the contact us. You can send me an email directly if you like. My email address, I don't know if we can put it in the chat. Can everybody see my email address if I put it in the chat or no?
We could do, if you want to share, you don't really have a screen available, do you? We could share your screen, but this will be on YouTube. And what we can do, Irv, is we have a summary that we put in text on YouTube.
Okay.
If you don't mind it being on YouTube as text, we'll put it in there.
No, that's fine. Yeah, just put it in there as text. That'll work.
And it's Irvin, ERVIN.Hughes, HUGHES at ACA, B as in boy, O as in Oscar, S as in Sam.com.
That's
and before
correct.
we go, we did have another question from Brandy Lynn. Are you there?
I'm here. I just wanted to say thank you so much for allowing me to talk with you guys. And I wish you had the opportunity to meet my boss. He's a little busy with some other stuff right now. But Nick, I think we're going to reach out to you and maybe do a sideline.
Absolutely. And the next session we'll have, and we can do that, but the next MyGovWatch Live session will be Wednesday, November 16th for anyone who may be looking at this recording later, or if you just want to jot that down. So thank you for joining us, Brandy Lynn, and we look forward to it.
Absolutely. Thank you.
So if there are no other questions, I'll just say that'll do it for today's edition of MyGovWatch Live. We talked a little bit about Irv and how to get in touch with him at www.aca.credit. You can connect with him on LinkedIn, myself as well, Nick Bernardo. If you have other questions about financing government purchase orders, you can be in touch with Irv. And remember, if you're not already a subscriber, start your free 14-day trial of mygovwatch.com today. If you want to win more government contracts for less, you'll be glad you did. And thank you, Irv.
Thank you so much for having me, Nick. I really enjoyed it. It was big fun, man. Let's do it again sometime.
We'll see you in the World Series.
All right. Take care.